Thanks so much for coming. I'm Dale Brick. I work here at the Harvard Environmental Energy Law Program upstairs. And we are so happy to be part of this whole amazing climate week, and especially to host our illustrative panel today. The goal for this session is just to help everybody understand better, like, what does it mean to be transitioning to clean buildings? Like, what are we really talking about? Why it's difficult? What are the issues that everybody who's working in this arena is really grappling with? What's at stake? What kind of benefits we could deliver if we really figure out how to do this in the smartest way? And, who are the players who needs to do what to realize that promise? I don't want to spend too much time on the introductions because I want to get right into the meaty conversation. You have more detail in your app. But today we have Rory Christian, who's the chair of the Public Service Commission in New York, who regulate all the utilities and really set the rules for what their business model is going to be. And he also has a history in housing, having literally written the book on how to decarbonize public housing in New York. We will shortly have Crystal Cornegay, who's the CEO of Massachusetts Housing, and is in the unique position of housing the new state green bank within that housing authority. No other state has done that. But sort of recognizes the centrality of housing agencies if we want to make housing efficient and electric. We should really be working with people who know housing. And then we have Abby Corso, who's the director of policy and strategy at Elevate, who's come all the way from Wisconsin to be with us. And Elevate operates in a number of states where they're actually on the ground delivering the programs that are improving housing with efficiency and electrification, especially in disadvantaged communities, which are historically so underserved with clean energy resources. So she has like the real action on the ground and help us think about how can we scale some of the things that we're already doing really well. And Elevate is also a leader of a network of organizations that are similarly delivering real programs on the ground across the U.S. and thinking together about how can they scale their operations to support this. So I'm just going to say a couple of words to kind of set the stage, and then we'll jump into the conversation. We are at a moment right now, and this probably come up in some of the other conversations that you've been in this week. We have all of this federal money, and a lot of it either is earmarked for buildings or can flow into buildings. We have $9 billion for home energy rebates for efficiency and electrification. There's a $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. Perfect timing. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, we're matching. No, not at all. We're just setting things up. So we have $27 billion. That's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which includes the Solar for All program, earmarked for disadvantaged communities, $14 billion of lending capital. What are we going to do with that, and how are we going to get it into buildings? And then a Clean Communities initiative, which is really more sort of like 1,000 flowers blooming, getting money to community lenders and helping them learn how to invest in this space in their communities. And there are several other large pots of money that states and cities and others have access to that can also go to buildings, but may not necessarily go there. So all of those resources are sort of floating around. How do we optimize them? How do we leverage existing infrastructure? Dollars are flowing to different players, and there are already different players on the ground. A lot of people talk about how do we have a whole of government approach to big challenges like greening the entire economy. And I think we are making some progress on that, but there's still a lot of siloed activity where you have multiple agencies, for example, within a state, all doing something similar and not making it into one well-oiled machine. So how can we kind of directionally move into something that's much more optimized and coherent? Shifting over to you guys, how are you feeling?
I'm great.
Excellent. Then I'm going to start with you.
Oh, great.
Since you got here just in the nick of time. How are you thinking about, this moment where we have these resources, but we still have these challenges? What are you guys already even doing to say, how do we make more and better housing? How can housing agencies be at the center of this? And what other people need to do to enable you guys to deliver everything that you can deliver? You can use this one if that one's not going on.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for being here. This is such a big issue, and I'm happy to do it. First, I want to introduce Maggie Church, who runs the state's climate bank, the first bank of the state, which is housed at Mass Housing, which is the state's housing finance agency, which every state has one. Basically, we issue bonds and use the proceeds of those bonds to lend to developers to build or preserve multifamily affordable rental, or to first-time home buyers through partner banks to buy their first home. When the state decided that it wanted to, we have a governor, Healy came on, one of her campaign promises was to go big on climate. First thing she did was to create a climate chief. And one of the first duties of the chief was to establish the climate bank. And in looking at that, they wanted to start out with equity in an equitable way, and decided that they were going to make the climate bank's initial investments be in affordable housing. And clearly, if you're doing affordable housing lending in this state, then you're doing it with Mass Housing. And so we worked together to do that. Brought Maggie on board, and have been going gangbusters ever since. I want to say, though, that this comes on the heels of COVID, in which we as a country spent billions of dollars in a matter of years. That's unheard of, right? And so we already kind of developed this muscle about how to move a lot of money quickly. And so totally did that in Mass Housing, and so we feel like this is the same kind of sprint. The challenge is that there are all these other players in which they have no idea around how the affordable housing finance ecosystem works. And so everybody wants to do affordable housing, and everybody wants to do equitable communities, and everybody wants to blah, blah, blah. And so our favorite example is our sister agency. We call ourselves the Climate Cousins. And so our sister agency, Environmental Affairs, one of their agencies, did this program for affordable housing, deep energy retrofits. And so they wanted to do a grant to projects. And for those of you who work in this space know, like, you can't do that in LIHTC projects. You can't do grants. And they were just like, what do you mean? And it's like, we're going to do a grant. And we're just like, no. The developer's like, no, we can't do that. And so really, we're trying to help people. We're positioning the climate bank to be like, okay, if we're all going to do this, then how do we all do this in a way in which we can maximize our impact and move that forward? And that's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but everybody means well, and so we're just gonna keep trying.
Great, thank you for that. So I'm hearing like you have to show up and know where you're going. You have to understand the existing ecosystem and customize the way these dollars are flowing to fit into that. Chair Christian, I want to turn it over to you. You come from both housing and energy. How are you seeing things play out, and how are you thinking about this in New York?
Well, I think we're at a very critical time, and I can say that at no point in my 20 plus years of working in the energy space have I seen the level of energy, pun intended, and intensity in housing energy and just renewable energy and ensuring sustainability in our building portfolios. This is unprecedented. And I want to correct, I didn't write a book. It was a 20-page paper. I had a couple audiences with me, co-writers with me.
It's the book that we have.
But we're at a very interesting time. I think for everybody in this room who follows what's been happening, either the building space, the energy space, the sustainability space, however you define it, what you've probably read in the narrative for the past 10 to 20 years has been the states are leading the way. California is doing X, New York is doing Y, other states are not, and the question is why. What you're seeing now is not only are the number of states engaging increasing, but you see unprecedented levels of federal support. I think the closest thing to this kind of federal support we've ever seen was ARRA funding, American
Rescue.
Rescue and Recovery Act. Thank you. Trying to block that acronym out of my head. But we're seeing more funding in a short period of time than we've ever seen before. This is a good thing, and it's aligned not just with go out there and build whatever you can, but build it in a way where equity is of paramount importance. And one example, if you've heard me speak before, we've heard this, but I'll share for those who don't. We changed how we built. 50 years ago, 1960, so 7 years ago, 2 power plants were being planned in New York State, one of which has been built, it's operational, the Ravenswood Power Plant. You watch any television show, movie filmed in New York between 1960 and 1999, and you will likely see the power plant stacks in the background. This was originally a coal-fired power plant built in what is effectively the geographic heart of New York City. Someone thought that was a really good idea, and someone also thought it was a good idea to build a nuclear plant right next to it. That didn't happen, fortunately. But the other plant that could have been built around the same time, Storm King. Show of hands, anyone here familiar with the Storm King plant? Well, if you're not, what that plant represents is what many believe to be as the beginning of the environmental movement in ensuring that power and industrial production does not harm the natural environment in which we live. And Storm King would have been a pumped hydro power station providing power to New York City. It would have been built by Con Ed. And the reason for it not being constructed, it would have damaged the fisheries in that community. And if you've never hiked Storm King, I strongly encourage you to. It's a beautiful area, but there's not much there. Very few people live in the surrounding community. So a choice was made to build a power plant, a coal-fired power plant, roughly a few hundred meters from public housing. One of the largest public housing developments in the country, then and now. That was okay. But not building this pumped hydro station, that was a win for the environmental movement. Our priorities have shifted. So now when we talk about equity, we're not simply talking about it in the abstract of we must preserve the environment. We're talking about it in terms of the impact of the people that live in the very communities in which infrastructure is either being built or not. And that is, I think, a very significant change from what we've done over the last 50, 60, 70 years, and a sign of what we need to do going forward. Now, coming with that is a recognition that this is a new consideration. And whenever you do things differently, there's a reason you're doing things differently. And in this instance, we're trying to be equitable in where we place those investments, ensuring the distribution is fair, but also ensuring that the negative impacts of those investments aren't concentrated in a particular community. We could talk about that all day long, but I'll save that, just accept that for the time being. That's been a fact for quite some time. When we talk about what we're doing today in terms of making these investments happen, whether they be directly in housing from an energy efficiency perspective or from an infrastructure perspective to build out the system and make it more capable, we need to make sure that equity is a key consideration, and so we look at those factors. And in doing so, what we provide is an opportunity to change the paradigm of how we've been building the system, both from an infrastructure perspective, but who has been involved in the building of the system from an infrastructure perspective. Early in my career, I was encouraged to join a union. I didn't, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't find anyone to help me get in. I didn't have an uncle, cousin, brother, anyone who had worked in the union. And as an immigrant to this country, doing that was a challenge. So we see a certain representation in certain unions today that don't necessarily align with the population served. What we're trying to do is change that, to make it more open, to create more opportunities for more individuals. And so all these investments, all this funding that is coming to make these investments happen, allow for opportunities to affect how we distribute these equitable outcomes in a fair and more robust way. And that is one of the key things that we in New York are trying to accomplish. It's baked into our law. The CLCPA, soon 2019, Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, requires a certain amount of investments benefit disadvantaged communities, and these are communities that have been historically marginalized or left out of the conversation in terms of what investments are made and the damage and harm and benefits, how those are distributed. And so we're looking to make sure that going forward, we don't repeat the mistakes of the past and have those lingering impacts negatively affect communities going forward, while also making sure the economic benefits can accrue across a wider array and not be concentrated to a select few who are in that.
Thank you. Adam, we want to shift over to you to get sort of a more granular sense of what's happening on the ground. Where do you see challenges and also opportunities when you're actually in these communities, in buildings? You know, what are you facing when you're trying to deliver these dollars and these benefits into a real building with real people?
You can share with
I
them.
think I'm gonna share. This mic doesn't seem to want to play today. Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be here, and thanks, Dal. I really appreciate, how we're talking about this. That this really is unprecedented time. It's unprecedented funding. I love your comment, Crystal, that like we did this during COVID. We moved this money, so it gives me a lot of hope. But I also, as a kind of practitioner and implementer in the space, I think that we've really, we have the J40 initiative, which is embedded in all of this work that's coming, or all of these opportunities coming out of the federal government. But I want to say it's kind of light on details. And the work that we're doing in the buildings is really heavy on details, because that's how we're getting the work done. And that's what we have to do. And I would say that we, as a building community, a building sector, we have to really think about some really desired outcomes that we want on this. We want equity, we want communities, to have a voice, but like, what are these desired outcomes like at the building level that we really need to see? And I would say we don't want to increase energy burden. We want to decrease it. I mean, 50% of renters are energy burdened, which means they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So we want that to be like a core tenet of all of this work. We don't want to fund new fossil fuel systems. I mean, this money is to decarbonize. So we want to make sure that that is a desired outcome, and it's kind of a core tenet. We want to make sure that we're doing health and safety, and we're repairing buildings, especially in the affordable housing sector. I think it's actually the Harvard study report that on housing that said there's like a $57 billion price tag to actually just do home repairs in these buildings. So we want to make sure that if we're putting new technology in, we're decarbonizing, we're making these buildings use less fossil fuel, but we also want to make sure we're making them better. We want to make sure they're healthier, that we're improving the indoor air quality, that we're, taking care of the whole building, because if we take care of the whole building, we're taking care of the residents, and we're taking people who live in those buildings, and then we're taking care of the communities that where people live and work and play. So I think technically, yes, we can do all of this from a technical standpoint. I think we're as a kind of somebody working in these buildings, where I think it's a little harder is on the policy side. And that really is like state policy and local policy, because there's some pretty basic things, with our building codes and with, how we meter buildings and how we align our programs, how are we doing health and safety in buildings and spending the homes and HERE money, coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think there's some core ways that we have to change our policy. That means changing behavior at a lot of different levels in our governments, which I know is slow, but we can do it, because Crystal's really good. So I would say, like, we have to work kind of at that local and state level. We have to really get people to change, like, the behaviors in state agencies, so that our programs are aligned, and that kind of that scarcity mindset is, you know, is kind of you know, just is tamped down and eliminated. I wanted to say we need to leverage programs that are working with all of this federal funding, and that includes, like, our weatherization programs, our home money, which is used for repairs. So we have lots of tools there, but we have to be able to work together. So from a building standpoint, for somebody who's, like, working in these buildings, that's really, I think, is going to be key for us to be able to do our job.
I just wanted to add that it's a lot of money, but it's money that can't achieve these things by itself. Mm-hmm. So it actually has to work well with other money. And to Abby's point, is like a capital stack. Massachusetts has a very sophisticated affordable housing finance ecosystem. New York does. California does. There are maybe 10, 15 places in the country for where that's true. Not true everywhere. And you get those, I'm going to be a little fresh, flyover states. And that also, right, like, we got to figure out how to do that there, but that's mostly single family homes. And that's a different issue, right? And we still, as a country, have not figured out how to crack that. And so the multifamily stuff, I'm like, we can figure out how to do that. We finance multifamily deals. The excuse me, the biggest tool that the country has to produce and preserve multifamily affordable rental is actually a tax program, but it's a program and it exists and it works and everybody knows how to work it, and we do policies and programs around it, and that's okay. But like, if we don't actually figure out how to use this money to actually get at people's homes, not just for the multifamily space, then I feel like we're really missing a huge opportunity, both in terms of what we're trying to achieve, kind of from the climate side, but also in equity, so to speak.
Yeah, if you guys want to say more about that, I think the last time we were on the panel together, I think, Abby, you said 60% of affordable housing in this country is single-family homes, and it is much harder. We can't wait and do that later after we figured it all out. But
yeah, it's over 60%. It's over 19 million units actually that are homes, single-family and multifamily, that are not subsidized. So they're not part of a tax credit program. They're not part of a public housing agency. They're by and large in private ownership. So these are investment properties that, you know, you see everywhere. Maybe you don't notice them, but they're all around us. And it's a huge part of our affordable housing stock. And if we don't address that, we're really only getting at less than half of the stock that is affordable. And I think what is you know, with our unsubsidized stock, we're also in danger of losing it. Like, I live in Madison, Wisconsin, so we do not have the programs that we have here. But we also have, we're also a very heavily gentrifying community. And this stock's in private hands, it's investment property for families, and we're losing it because of rising housing prices, because this area is heavily gentrifying. So in addition to, I think, really tackling, you know, the buildings that are coming into our tax credit program, that are coming through, you know, our, you know, project-based Section 8 programs, we really, we have to pay attention to this, and it's a different fix. There's still money. The technical work in the buildings is really similar, but it's a different policy fix to actually, you know, start addressing those buildings.
Yeah, I think a point I was going to make when Crystal was talking, but you touched on it very clearly. is a difference between the beginnings of what was public housing, what was affordable housing, and where we are today. I had the benefit of working for the New York City Housing Authority earlier in my career, and you learn a lot about the history of public housing in part because it started with the New York City Housing Authority, first houses. And when you think about what affordable housing was before public housing, slums, ghettos, tenements. And if you've never visited a tenement museum, I encourage you to do so to understand what that means. Public housing was revolutionary in that it provided safe, affordable, livable housing for families with conditions that no one had ever experienced before. Even market rate housing was not to the level of affordable housing when it first began. And the portfolio grew from a few hundred units to thousands to hundreds of, to ultimately 200,000 at one point at its peak in New York City, and well beyond in other areas as well. But public housing has always been the cutting edge. It has always been, what can we do well? Where can we take technology to make housing better for the people living in it? Unfortunately, today the perception is not so much the case. Anywhere you read about public housing, the news is not always positive. They're always highlighting the negatives of it for one reason or another, but it serves a very valuable purpose. It helps those in need create a foothold, survive, and raise families. And that, I think, is something everyone can get behind at the end of the day. So when we think about it in that context, how did public housing begin? It wasn't 60, 70% single-family homes in private hands. It was public funding, federal funding, combined with state and local funding in many instances, are what provided that new beginning for public housing in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. We don't have that today. And as much as I'm very happy with the funding that we're seeing now, trust me, I want more. I think what we're seeing here and what I'm hearing from both of you is a bit of a disconnect. Because on the one hand, there are energy people, I'm an energy person, and then there are housing people, I'm also a housing person. And because I'm both, I know the two don't always talk together. And right now, a lot of this funding is coming through energy, through sustainability, to go to housing, and there's not necessarily a way to connect those two in an effective way across the country to deliver these fundings in a meaningful way. Now, I can say in New York, we've been working on making that connection for a very long time. We have the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority at the state level that is a provider of funds through ratepayer funds that we collect for energy efficiency and other programs. We have a number of city and state agencies that are focused on housing by themselves, that work closely with NYSERDA and the utilities. So we have an existing ecosystem, and I think the challenge, Dale, ultimately is going to be coordinating all those people to work together to make that happen. That's its own challenge. But where I think the greatest challenge lies is in states, some of them are flyover, where we don't necessarily have that existing ecosystem, either on the energy or the housing side. How do you create that to take advantage of this funding and deliver it in a meaningful way? That's an outstanding question.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you're highlighting, and we've talked before about just the dawn of public housing and how large government investment, you said it with COVID too, it's like demonstrating that government can work and can deliver real benefits to people and improve quality of life and sort of lift everyone up, as opposed to let's shrink government and drown it in the bathtub because government's the problem and government can't work. And now we're at this moment where we have another opportunity with a scale of investment, but we've got to get it right and really deliver that benefit. And you are not a unique in all the world, but a rare bilingual speaker of housing and energy. And how can we have more hope that in many states, sometimes we're building it from scratch, sometimes we're like taking a mishmash and making it more coherent. Like I think New York and Massachusetts are both examples of that. And we have the added challenge that the money isn't designed to go right into the ecosystem, and it has other strings attached. It has Davis-Bacon labor standards, and yes, everyone should have a living wage, but it creates a challenge in places where that's not what the market is already doing. Or Build America, Buy America. You mentioned we have dilapidated housing, we have to fix that first. So how do we deliver more and better housing and start directionally correct, bringing these two things together, and not be dragged down by all the sort of strings and challenges, so that we can, because it's not enough. We need more. We're gonna have to double down, but we're not gonna double down if we don't prove that we can do it. So I would love to hear, let's start with you again, Crystal, like more, like how are we doing this? You guys are doing so many cutting edge things here, and I know you feel like it's still a big challenge. And pulling that money, like, for example, the greenhouse gas reduction fund money that maybe can go directly to housing agencies. What can states be doing to actively pull that money and show everyone, here's a way that we can get it done?
Yeah, I wanna start by saying Maggie is also a bilingual that speaks housing and speaks energy. So one of the reasons I was like, you have to read more. And so there's that. I am a houser. I speak housing all day long. I've been doing this all day long. And the thing about housers are that because they're used to braiding and stacking capital, they're used to the idea of this money comes with that string, federal money is Davis Bacon, and blah blah blah. And so this is why I say it's like Tuesday. It's like Tuesday. We're gonna figure out how to do it. We got a bunch of deals that need to be press deals anyway, and blah blah blah. And the big part about this is what you're saying, like what are we measuring? Like how do we measure success, right? And how do you measure reducing, right, your energy load? And so there's behavior change and like who's reporting what to who. That becomes a big part of that. But putting the money to work in places that have an ecosystem is not difficult. Now, in places that do not have an ecosystem, and in many places, the energy folks are taking the lead, right? And that creates a challenge because while affordable housing finance is not rocket science, right? But it is one of those things where it's just like if you don't do it every day, it is a different kind of language. Like he's like worried about acronyms. I only speak in acronyms. I don't even understand what you're talking about if you don't drop an acronym on me. And so there's a lot about that. But it is gonna be a lot on a state level. And so the question is not just it's like what level of preparedness is your state at? Which agency, which kind of language is leading, and who are the translators in your state. A lot of the reason that states aren't ready is unfortunately, there are many states that just don't care, right? It's not their thing. And so, from a purely selfish perspective, I don't care because I'm going to take your money and I'm spending it and it's going to be okay. But from a larger perspective, the idea is like we're not going to get to where we need to be unless everybody participates. And so in all things, there are going to be early adopters, and then there's going to be some folks who come along, and there'll be some models that people will be able to utilize to kind of lead the way. This is one of those things too in which the GGRF, there's a big push to spend a bunch of money quickly for obvious political reasons. And so another thing that happens is California, New York, Massachusetts, Oregon will be able to do that because we've been doing this work for a while. And so our machine, so to speak, exists. We're gonna, it's gonna be annoying, just because there are a bunch of folks, I don't speak energy, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not necessarily feeling like I need to learn that. I just need to learn what's important to you, right? And then we can work together in how we put this money to work. Because for us, at the end of the day, I started my career on the ground. So at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that your house has a reduced energy burden and that my grandkids, have a cleaner earth to live in. So, and if we all sort of get aligned around that, then it's gonna be okay. I'm from the government.
Well, Crystal, I volunteer to help you your dictionary.
Thank you.
And I want to say this, I am of the opinion that everyone needs to speak energy.
Okay.
I think that's where we need to go, that's where we need to be, because very few people fully appreciate how much energy goes into everything we do, even clothing we're wearing,
Yeah,
right? The fact that we are here today, you drove here.
I did.
Exactly, energy, right? There's a whole
My plug-in
ecosystem.
hybrid, though. I want to be clear.
But the key to all this, I think, is, just going to the question of what you posed about buildings. How do we get buildings to where they're going to be? Building codes. If your building codes aren't modern, nothing you build going forward is going to get you where you need to go. We in New York did a study for the CLCPA where we looked at what's our portfolio of buildings, EVs, vehicles, airplanes, everything that uses energy, to understand what needs to happen and where we need to go. And one of the things we identified early on, if the building codes are not modernized, it doesn't matter what you do. You have to stop the energy. So we're going forward with developing advanced building codes with high efficiency insulation, proper windows, better air circulation, not quite passive house standard, but close enough to make a significant dent and ensure that new construction is electrification ready. We have a lot of homes in New York. A lot of our homes are from the early 1900s, where insulation was an option rather than a requirement. So those homes need to be upgraded. So in addition to making sure we build the right homes going forward, the right structures, we also need to have programs to adapt and modernize what exists. And this federal money is going to be hugely helpful in helping us do that. Now, in terms of identifying where to go from there, then the question becomes, how do we make sure that what we develop within our homes, within our businesses, within our commercial structures, all the lived buildings that we have, can operate in a newer ecosystem of energy. If you think about, I'm going to ask a few questions. I love audience participation if you haven't noticed. Have any of you been in a building that burns coal in the last few months? Ooh, we should have a conversation later. What about oil? Okay. Natural gas? Right. Okay. What about an electrified home? Not too bad. Okay. But you see how that worked, right? Very few in coal, a few more in oil, many in natural gas. That is the story of the energy evolution, and then quite a few in electrified homes. Every decision we have made in terms of what energy makes sense, made sense at the time it was made. We were using whale oil at one point to light our homes. Let that sink in, and we moved from that to other products because it made sense. We moved from coal to oil because it made sense. Oil and natural gas, again, it made sense. And the same is applying now. And it's not simply because electricity is a 100% better fuel in every way, shape, or form. It is because it provides us benefits above and beyond what those other fuels provide. Right? Someone said to me once, why are we investing in all this infrastructure that's going to cost more? Well, here's the thing, we've been doing that the whole time. Our entire shift towards natural gas costs more. I have colleagues in the Midwest, the flyover states again, who are using coal, who have criticized us in New York for switching to natural gas because it was so much more expensive. So I challenge everyone to think about this, and I say this often, price has not always been the bottom line. It's about what are the additional benefits you get. We do not value all the various impacts of soot, of pollution, of other health impacts they bring about, but we do know that they're there. And we do have analyses where we can value that. But it's hard to do that in rates as they are now. And absent any more stringent federal policy, doing that on a national basis will be challenging. But what we do know is as we move towards electrification, as we electrify our system, as we ensure our buildings can operate 100% electric, we put ourselves on a path where we're choosing the best path forward that is better than all that have come before. I challenge you to find a place that wants to build a coal plant versus a natural gas plant on the East Coast. Right now, most people don't even want to build a natural gas plant, as you stated earlier, right? They want solar or wind. The direction is clear. And so in addition to having the right building codes, in addition to setting up the funds and the practices to modernizing our buildings, we need to make sure our energy infrastructure can accommodate that modernization as it happens. And one of the key things that we at the Commission do, we ensure that the various markets for energy are aligned to provide benefits. And with that in mind, think about your home for a second. You've probably gotten an electric bill at some point. You get it in the mail, you pay it, that kind of is it. That's been the history of energy for the past 100 years. Well, everyone has a cell phone. How many of you can log into your electric account and see how much energy you were using 15 minutes ago? Show of hands. All right, I promise you in 10 years' time, when I ask that question, everyone will have raised their hands. We're at a point where the old paradigm of how we deliver energy is no longer applicable. It worked then, 50, 100 years ago. We can do better now. And every investment we at the Commission are making in New York State is aligned with ensuring that all of us can be more than just burdens on the energy system, more than just a cost. It's that the individual decisions each of us make can be something that helps the system as a whole. Every EV, every solar panel, every battery storage facility, every time you unplug or plug in your phone, that can help with the balancing of the grid as a whole, helping with the intermittent renewables that are being deployed, helping eliminate or reduce the need for peaker plants operating at certain times of the year. All of this is part of a big ecosystem. So when I say to you, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna get you an energy person. You are going to be so fluent in energy that
I'm sold. I take a couple of things also for granted while you're talking, occurred to me. At least 25% of the affordable housing that we build in Massachusetts is built to passive house standards already, right? So there are things that like I take for granted about this kind of stuff. And so when I think about GGRF, I think about it predominantly as a preservation strategy. How are we investing in existing buildings? Because there's no kind of clear way to get enough financing to do that, right? And it's like those buildings aren't going anywhere, right? And so I feel like we're moving right toward a place in our new construction, thinking of our buildings. The city of Boston is doing so with their building code, and folks are thinking about this across the space, and so it is nice to be reminded, A, that I got language I gotta learn, and B, that, you know, we aren't necessarily, like we're on a path somewhere. Like we're not starting, we're not near the end, but we are clearly on a path somewhere.
So to go down that path, I want to touch on workforce development, and Abby, I want you to talk about some of the work that you're doing, because a lot of people who are in the thick of doing this are running, especially in the existing buildings, running into the challenge of we have not built the workforce to deliver at scale what's needed, and there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, but there are some really exciting things going on, and you guys are in the thick of that. If you could describe to us.
Yeah, sure. I just want to just make a comment. You know, all of our new construction, it's going to be existing buildings at some time, so we have to prepare for fixing those buildings and or keeping them upgraded. So on the workforce side, I think with all of the Inflation Reduction Act money, especially the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is actually the biggest pot of Inflation Reduction Act money, it's $27 billion of the whole kind of IRA. Workforce is, it's talked about, it's mentioned. It's not necessarily like directly applied with funding in all of this work that we're being asked to do. So that means, you know, if we don't have a really well-trained workforce, and if we don't have a small business community that's able to do this work, we're not going to get it done. I mean, we'll get big projects done. You know, the big firms are only going to be there. We're not going to get the little projects done, which is kind of what's in communities and in the heart of communities in many ways. So my organization is taking this from a couple different standpoints. We're not a workforce organization. We don't train individual workers. The technical colleges in the Midwest do a lot of that. We have, all kinds of other programs. We have almost singularly been focusing our efforts on the small business community. And what we've been doing is at the community level, we've been having either a 3 or 6 month, accelerator cohort to really help the disadvantaged businesses. So, minority-owned women or veteran-owned businesses who are either doing work like doing HVAC work or doing insulation work, or are adjacent to those industries. So adjacent being like maybe they're a roofer, so now they can want to do more insulation work, or maybe they're a roofer and they want to start doing solar. And we've been really working with that class of kind of businesses so that we can ready them for growth. And that's not only technical skills. Sure, there's, if you have to put a heat pump in, it's a little different than putting a gas furnace in. But where our small businesses really need help is kind of in their back office. They need help with like invoicing. I mean, because the owner is doing the work and he's running the business and he's doing the marketing. So they need invoicing help, they need back office support, and then they need access to capital. And I think that is one of the promises of this money, is that if we have all of this money flooding in for upgrading buildings and for doing that work, getting some capital to these small businesses so that they can bring another crew on, or they can buy more materials while they're waiting to get paid. I think really like taking a look at our small business ecosystem, like we've been talking a little bit about leveraging what's out there already. We have a great small business administration, like at the local level. I mean, we have lots and lots of resources, but they're not coordinated. So that's kind of how we've been approaching this: is how can we take what's there, and we take our entrepreneur centers, our incubators, the technical help for their back office, and kind of put it all in one place, so that we're not only leaving buildings behind, we're not leaving kind of our small minority contractors behind in this work.
Great, thanks. We're running low on time, and I would love to get a few questions in, but Roy, I don't want to end up this panel and not have heard from you on affordability. And when we think about transitioning from fossil fuel-based heating and to electrification, that's not always a story of improving energy affordability. When we talked about how to get more and better housing, but how do we actually do this transition and make energy more affordable when we are looking at some things that are more expensive? Like you said, historically we have done this before, but how do you think about a just and equitable transition that actually improves affordability as we make this transition?
All right, so I think about this a lot. I lose a lot of sleep about this. And there's two ways to answer this question. I'm going to focus on one. One way, aligning federal incentives to support the direction we're going in. I'm not going to get into details on that unless we have some time. And then the second is ensuring that we can provide a guarantee that those who have electrified, who move forward with this, are not overly burdened by that choice. So prior to my arrival at the commission, one of my predecessors established the goal of a 6% energy affordability guarantee. And what that means in New York is 6% of your income, no more than, should go towards your energy needs. Now, if you think about that as an idea, it's amazing, it's great, but it's really hard to do in practice. For those of you who drove here in a gasoline vehicle, that's nice. I don't regulate gasoline in New York State, and neither do any of my peers in their neighboring states. Gasoline's its own thing. If you buy propane, kerosene, again, not my problem. I don't deal with that at all, in any way, shape, or form. Heating oil isn't under my umbrella either, but natural gas is, and electricity is, right? But also, it gets a little even more complicated. In New York City, if you were to drive through Queens at any given time, You could be in an area served by a single utility, Con Ed, for both natural gas and electric, or two utilities, where Con Ed provides electric and National Grid provides natural gas. Imagine juggling that, right? Where we see a future is with individuals who have electrified, we have the ability, through one bill, to provide them with an opportunity to have that guarantee. And we've developed through the last few years, actually COVID actually helped us really refine our ability to do this. We developed a program, an energy affordability program, where we paid down arrears accrued during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is several $billion of arrears throughout all the utilities in the state. This required a lot of collaboration, not just with the utilities, which are not public entities, they're investor-owned utilities, these are private corporations, with various public service entities that provide incentives, so WIC, Social Security benefits, and other benefits like that. Generally speaking, if you're getting a public benefit, you're probably low income, you most likely are. We figured out a way to identify those individuals earning less than a certain threshold and essentially pay off their arrears. And in doing that, we've identified a population that could benefit from a 6% energy guarantee. So in moving forward with this, what we're in a position to do is if you have one bill, an electric bill, and you have an electric vehicle and you heat your home with electricity and you use electricity for everything else, we have an ability to actually make that guarantee a reality. That is one path forward that we are working on, that we've developed the tools to realize. And so the trick will be to get people to actually electrify their homes, but that has its own challenge. By some estimates, it will cost $50,000 per unit to electrify an apartment building or a home in New York State. That's a lot. That's not just changing a stove. So ensuring the federal money that we're going to be getting can help offset many of those costs will definitely move us further along than if we did not have that money otherwise. So.
Excellent. All right, let's open it up, and you had your hand up first in the back, and then I see you right in the front, right afterwards.
Thanks for the great discussion. My question's about an extremely sexy topic, which is rate design.
We love that topic.
So there's many components in terms of why that's relevant to this conversation. I think 4 in particular that come to mind. One is the electrification piece, reducing the marginal costs of electricity. 2 is sort of this climate resilience piece, especially California with wildfires. 3 is this equity affordability conversation. And then there's a piece, I'm forgetting the 4th, but that's the general gist. So I'm just curious, what do you see as where innovative rate designs should go moving forward? And then maybe a separate question, which is, where do you see it likely to go moving forward?
Oh,
I think you're our resident rate designer expert here.
Normally there are other people who can answer this question with me.
Kristen, would you like to answer that question? I don't think I speak that.
You get a pass this time.
Thank you.
So the question on rate design is a hot topic. I'm not going to give you guys rate school 101. I will bore half of you to death and confuse the rest. I'm sorry. But the basic premise behind rate design is how do you design rates so that everyone using the resource, what they pay in covers the cost to provide that resource, right? That's a really simplistic way of explaining rates in an easy way. Rates right now are divided into classes. You have industrial customers, commercial customers, and residential customers. And to put it in perspective, one industrial customer could use as much energy as every residential customer in the region. That happens. But they also pay a fraction of what a typical residential customer uses. Again, we can talk about the rationale behind that. That's an economic analysis thing that I'm not prepared to go into right now, but I know people who are. In designing the rates, the goal is to ensure that what you collect covers the costs. Right now, for the vast majority of people in this room and beyond, when you get your electric bill, there are 2 numbers. There's a supply charge, which is what you pay for the electrons or the fuel coming into your home. And then there's a T&D charge, which is the infrastructure to get that energy into your home. That T&D charge, that's set. That's through rate process, that's kind of fixed. But that supply charge is very pernicious. It varies from month to month. You'll probably notice in the summer it's a lot higher for your electric and it's a lot lower in the winter. But what you don't notice is at a certain point in the day, that price could be triple what you see on your bill, or 10 times even, or it could be 0. Most people do not have transparency into when energy is cheapest at any point in the day and when it's most expensive. And because of that, we have all, and I say all of this because I include myself in this, we have all been lulled into a false sense of understanding of how energy use impacts its cost. To put that in perspective, 100 hours of the year is what drives the majority of the costs, because that's when the peak occurs. We don't build our energy systems to work most of the time and fail when it's really hard. They need to work every time. And the example that I find works best is, if you need to fly from New York to London, you're probably on an Airbus 380 or a 747. You're not going to get an Cessna to do that. But you could get an Cessna to fly from here from Baltimore and get there safely. We build big for those 100 hours, and there's a cost for that. And the worse conditions get during those 100 hours, the bigger we must build, and everybody pays for that cost. So from a cost containment perspective, one of the things we in New York and Massachusetts and others, Ben Ostrom and I talk about this all the time, he's the chair of your commission here, how do we ensure that the peak does not go higher? What do we do to lower that peak? Now, what's interesting in New York State, we've done a very good job of actually lowering energy use. 2009, we used about 165,000 megawatt hours of electricity. Last year, we used 150,000 megawatt hours of electricity. So we use way less, more than 10% less than we did many years ago. But here's the thing, our demand, relatively flat, around 32 gigawatts, stays the same. Bringing that down will be a huge accomplishment, and it will help with rates in a very big way. And to do that, imagine if we could pay you to use less energy at certain times of the day. But the only way for us to know you're using less energy is to have a meter that's smart enough to tell us that between noon and 1 or 2 and 4, wherever the peak time is, you didn't use as much energy as you normally would, or you use less energy than everybody else, or whatever it may be. The technology is there where we can now track this. And what we at all the commissions, chairs of every commission around the country, big challenge is, how do we bring that technology to the masses? How do we enable the democratization of energy in a true way where all of us can benefit equally? This approach, the ability to monitor the cost of energy on an hourly or a 15-minute basis, is something every industrial customer already benefits from. It's also something many commercial customers benefit from, but most residential customers don't. So from a rate design perspective, to answer your question directly, one of the things we in New York are doing is looking at time of use pricing, or time variant pricing, TOU, TVP, lots of different acronyms. By showing customers more variable pricing, we can send a signal that, hey, when you use energy at this time, it's more expensive, you should use more at this time. That creates an opportunity for people to think about batteries differently. Rather than it being, oh, the lights went out, I should get a battery system to hook up. I can use that battery to arbitrage energy, storing it when it's cheap, using it when it's more expensive. Again,
Yes.
you're going to learn all this stuff, I promise.
We're all going to be arbitragers. I want to get one more question in at least, and then we don't necessarily have to run out of here.
I'd like to say, Laura, you're way behind.
I know.
We're currently doing demand management with artificial intelligence with Southern Company today.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the technology now to be able to manage the energy at a house level. And we can tell by attaching to the smart thermostat how efficient that envelope is, and actually give you the priorities, the economic priorities for weatherizing that house. Leave the technology behind to operate that house. Now this technology, we won the Global ASHRAE First Place Technology Award in 2014 with the university building, reducing the energy 55% in the building, okay? Using physics principles we can talk about later. But I'm working with 4 pilots with community-based organizations on weatherizing houses in Detroit, Birmingham, Anniston, Alabama, and North Carolina. We cannot get the adoption because it costs about $1,000 per house, and it protects the house. It includes water sensors for when the house, you spring a leak and you got $11,000 worth of damage to your flooring. Because of the first cost itis that we're dealing with. I want the lowest, this whole country's building stock is built on the lowest first cost. We can pay for the technology in 5 years, but when you take it to the community-based organization, say, oh, by the way, I want another $1,000 for these 50 houses, they're saying, oh, wait a minute, that's 2 or 3 more houses we can weatherize, and you can't sell it. But if you want to reduce the energy burden on the people, we need community-based solar systems, we need microgrids, we need demand management, not by somebody being incentivized to turn, if they don't do it, they won't get up and turn down the thermostat. You need AI that adjusts the thermostat, okay? Why can't I sell that?
Yeah. Sounds like also a challenge for the Green Bank. So it's great that you're here, Maggie. There's a little time value of money there. We're over time, but do you want to respond to that or?
We could talk for probably another 5
All right.
hours, but you're right, I am behind, but I see the future and I'm on the same page.
Excellent. On that happy note, I know there were more questions, and let's try to get as many as we can after hours, as it were. But I just want to please join me in thanking this meeting.